having said all that. Well, thank you so very much. Thank you for being here. We're talking a lot about Nancy Pelosi tonight, and she's a magnificent woman, but this dinner sort of reminds me. She always asks me at the beginning of every Congress that we've shared, so what do you know, what do you think? And because she knows that I'm always looking over the crowd, the new members that are coming through the door. Sometimes they come in dribs and drabs, and sometimes there's a lot, and that's exciting, especially when we're on the Democratic side of the aisle. It's really exciting. And I just want to tell you something, my sense about this dinner. That if we can replicate this dinner every now, certainly until Mark serves 40 years, it'll be great. 40 years, 140-year-old congressman. But on a serious note, this is the greatest collection of Democratic volunteers, party people, and elected officials that we've ever had together in this county in my 40 years in the Congress of the United States. And this is not to be dismissed. This is to be grown. This has to continue to grow, because this is an energy source that we need in politics, in this state, in this county, that's so terribly important to transmit that back to the Capitol where I work. And I can't thank you enough for being here tonight. This is just an amazing collection of people who've given all of their spare time and their talents to serving in government, in public policy, or supporting those who do. And to me, enough said. I mean, it's just magnificent to be in the room with all of you. Thank you so very much for all of the commitments that you've made, all of the time that you've spent, all of the energy that you've put in to serving or to electing others. Thank you so very much for being here tonight. It's wonderful. It's just absolutely wonderful. Yeah, pretty soon we'll have to build a new convention center. We'll be so big. And Chuck, it was just a little idea and everybody told you were a fool. You did it. It's great. And everybody helped. Thank you. Thank you. It's magnificent. Craig and Christine, thank you. Gee, guys, you look like you're back and forth on the Emmys or something here. This is great. What talent. In Concord, California. This is pretty exciting. Next we're going to have you walk the rope line down there, when we come in. To my colleagues, to Jerry and to Mike, thank you for being here. I know what it means to go to one more event. I know Mike, you came down from St. Helena, and Jerry came over from the other end of his district. It's great to share a Contra Costa County with you, and it's great knowing that you're going to be here along with Mark to take care of this county. It's a great place to represent. It's magnificent. We all remember Jerry's first campaign, the campaign that couldn't be won except that he won it. Thank God he did. And so many people in this room helped him. And he's been such a great addition to our delegation and to the Congress. And a lot of votes that aren't tough for a lot of people are tough votes for him, and he takes them. And I love him for taking them. Thank you so much, Jerry, for being here. To Mike, great leadership in the state legislature, now in the Congress, and we've become great friends and colleagues in our effort. And I want to thank him so much for his leadership on what may be one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult issue in this country, and that's how do we end gun violence. Yeah. And he's been absolutely magnificent on this issue. He comes to this issue as a veteran, a wounded veteran, and he comes to this issue as a great hunter. And he talks to people who couldn't hear the debate before, and he's slowly turning people's minds in the Congress to understand that This isn't about taking away people's guns and all that. This is about rational thinking of how you reduce gun violence in this country, and we stop what we see every day. So thank you so very much for being here. And it's certainly, it's certainly exciting to, I don't contemplate retiring. I'm retiring. Don't worry, Mark. I'm not changing my mind. Never mind. I've lost it seeing her say all these nice things about me. Certainly to be here in a dinner with in honor of Roosevelt, my hero, and my thing that I wanted to live up to, a person who he understood the power of his enemies. He also understood the injustice that those enemies were raining on the nation in economic disparity and unfairness and all of the rest of it. And it's a great model, and it's great that you started this dinner in that tradition for our party. And this is really so many of you here in my family. I want to single out two who started with me and just have been magnificent. And that's Gwen Regalia. I think she's still back in the back here. Gwen Regalia from Long Creek, just fabulous person. I had to get elected 4 times before she stopped calling me Georgie. Actually, she hasn't stopped calling me. That's a hint, Gwen. But just magnificent person in public life and policy and Democratic politics. And also, I want to mention, because I think she's still here, Marcella Coleridge. Just a year or 2 ago, she came to Washington to give me hell. I said, I'm going to come visit you at your house. She didn't have to come all the way to Washington, but she thought it'd make a better impression on me. I was certainly impressed with people she was with. They're like, but she thought the big banks were being unfair to homeowners, and she wanted me to know about that. So it was great. All of you, and so many people have supported me, have given me a fabulous honor to serve in the Congress of the United States of America for 40 years. It's a gift, and it's a gift that I never ever wanted to abuse. I always wanted to see if I could grow it, if I could polish it, if I could take good care of it, and then to pass it on. And when I first ran for Congress, and when I was elected, the week after I was elected, I went down to North Richmond Missionary Baptist Church, and Reverend Newsom was the Reverend at that time, and he had supported my father and been very helpful to me, and he gave a speech, and this is when they were having the Watergate trials and Nixon impeachment. And so forth, and so he said we made a decision, and we sent our boy to Washington. And he said now we're going to pray for our boy not to fall out of the boat. He said it's a rough seas to get to Washington, and it's a rougher seas when you're there. But we're not going to have our boy fall out of the boat like that Richard Nixon fell out of the boat, and like that John Haldeman fell out of the boat. We're not going to let our boy fall out of the boat. So we're going to pray for you every Sunday till you don't fall out of the boat like everybody else that's gone to Washington. Obviously, 40 years has stuck with me. I thought if I fell out of the boat, they'd just strike me dead right there. So I had the spine, if you will, not to fall out of the boat. But it has. I can't tell you how many nights I've walked through the magnificent capital of this country, at midnight, at 2 o'clock in the morning, in the old days when we had conference committees that almost went around the clock trying to work out the differences between Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate and the administrations. But the idea was that we could work it out with all of our differences. We could come to an agreement on elementary, secondary education. We could come to an agreement on coal mine safety. We could come to an agreement on clean air. We could come to an agreement on workers' rights. And people, you couldn't get everything you wanted, but you could get an advancement in terms of social policy and social good. But those late nights when there's nobody else in the Capitol and it's kind of lit indirectly in a magnificent building, I used to say to myself, what's a kid from Martinez doing here? And how fortunate I was to be given this gift. And you know, in those 40 years, I had the honor of chairing 3 committees: the Committee on Natural Resources, the Committee on Education and Labor, and the Committee on Children, Youth, and Families. I asked the Congress to create, and Speaker Tip O'Neill created it for me. And it was the first time we did a really massive investigation into the status of children in this country. And this was during the Reagan years. I was a little rough getting the committee started because I wanted to be children, youth, and families. And my colleagues said, can't we just do children and families? The youth, they drive you nuts. They make you crazy. And they're too controversial. They want to have sex and all this. We don't want to talk about the youth. And so Speaker O'Neill said, George, I don't think we can do this. It'd just be children and families. And I said, well, you know, this big part of the problem is kids and adolescents and how they can, you know, do well in school and do responsibility. It's a tough time of life. And so he said, well, I think we're going to do it next week. We're going to do it. And then he called me to his office the next week. And there were several nuns in the office. Sister Mary and Joseph was there from Boston. And so he started explaining to her how excited he was that we're going to have this committee on children. It's the first time ever in the Congress. It's going to be a select committee. It's going to be even Democrats and Republicans. And we're going to do this investigations. And he said it's going to be children and families. Sister Mary and Joseph looked at the Speaker of the House of the United States of America and said, Thomas, it's children, youth, and families. And he said, George, take the resolution to the floor. So it's a strange and winding road that you can have in the Congress of the United States. But it was an honor. In those days, we thought we could convince the country that we weren't spending money on children, we were investing. And we didn't allow Democrats in that session of Congress to talk about spending on education, spending on maternal and child health, spending on child nutrition, early childhood education at that time, or Head Start. These were investments. And we even got Ronald Reagan to go along with it. He and Nancy announced that Head Start was their absolute favorite governmental program. And he whipped that old budget up there because he wanted to invest in children. I said, we just won the bidet here. It was magnificent. You know, it's what you say. It's how it works. And it was great. It was great. And that's what I've had. Is I've had the opportunity to work on legislation from the first bill that I worked on in Congress, which was to give children with disabilities access to public education. I never knew they didn't have access to public education until I sat in the committee and listened to the hearings. And children were put off to out of school, out of public schools, were put in church basements, were put in community centers, but they weren't educated. And today it's considered one of the fundamental civil rights in this nation that people with disabilities have access to the workplace, they have access to the chance to work on workers' rights, to take, I think, maybe one of the most dangerous jobs in this country, coal mining, and to recognize the rights of these people to go to work in the morning and come home safe at night and to improve their lives, to be able to deal with privacy as it gets more and more complicated. And Mike's been a big help on this because he served on the Intelligence Committee, so he sort of knows it both ways. Who would have thought this would have been such an issue at this time? But that's what technology brings to us, to work on immigration, to see what's happening on our border, to understand that people we've got to have a policy in this country, and it's important. But none of this happens by accident. It happens because people like you are in this room today to support those of us in political life. These are tough issues, especially in this environment. We can all harken back to a time when we may have been able to work this out, and we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. And it's a great story how Republicans and Democrats, we could not have passed that. Could not have passed it without the Republican support for it, because the Southern Democrats were not going to vote for it. So we had to have that, but we got it, and we started down that road in terms of on civil rights. And today, 50 years later, after the Civil Rights Act, after the Voting Rights Act, today we have to make a fight all over again today to make sure that everybody who wants to cast their vote has a right to cast their vote, because there's an effort to keep them from doing that. There's an active, fully funded effort to keep people from voting in this country. And we want to hold ourselves out to the people in Ukraine, the people in Russia, the people in China, the people in Latin America that stood in the way of bullets, the people in the Middle East who stood in the way of bullets and watched people get killed in the voting lines. And we want to tell them how brave they are. But we want to tell somebody, if you don't have the proper ID, if you can't prove you can't prove a 78-year-old woman, if you can't prove that you're old enough to vote, we're not going to let you vote in Florida. We're not going to let you vote on Sundays because you might be influenced by your church. Where the hell did we come up with all of this idea that democracy wasn't open in this country? We preach all around the world that it's open, and yet we have a concentrated effort between the courts and the Republican Party and the Tea Party to deny people the right to vote in the United States of America. Who the hell are they? Who the hell are they? And that's why this dinner has to be replicated. That's why your energy that you put in on behalf of so many of us who've been successful in public life and candidates yet to come. Because we're going to open up this democracy. We're not going to close it down because we're afraid of people who look differently than we are, who have different colored skin, speak a different language, come from a different country. This is America. We're not going to shut the ballot box off to people. We're going to open it up. We're going to open it up. But understand, that's what's happening in a good portion of this country, is they try to fight back the demographics, they try to fight back the younger generation, they try to fight back things that they thought they were against their whole lives, that people are now accepting as wrong then and right today to change. This is a real battle. And in politics, there's no final score. There's no final score. You win something today. You win the Voting Rights Act, and lo and behold, you find yourself 30 years later trying to save it because somebody wants to take it away. You win the rights for kids with disabilities to go to school, and somebody wants to take it away. You win you struggle. You struggle for a minimum wage, and you think, well, now we've done it, now it'll happen again. No, you got to struggle again. Every day in this life, and that's what you signed up for, as volunteers, as party officials, as club members, as elected officials. You got to saddle up and ride into the battle, because there's others who want to change it back the way it was when it wasn't fair, when it discriminated, when it didn't provide for equal rights. In a country that was founded on all men and women are created equal. That's the battle today. It sounds so foreign and so long ago, but it's the battle today. And it ricochets on everything else that we stand for as a party, that Franklin Roosevelt stood for as a party, that Nancy Pelosi has stood for as a party, that my colleagues and I in the California delegation stand for. It's a battle. You can live in California and think this is the world. No. And that's why so many of you have helped, in the past campaigns to achieve a majority by traveling to other states or taking bus trips to Nevada when we took the seats in Nevada. And we're going to have to do that again. We're going to have to do that again. We're not turning this nation over to the Koch brothers. I don't care how rich they are. about we need all hands on deck, because these are important values of our country. They're important principles, and they're also important rights, as we as a huge, dynamic, diverse democracy. It'd be easy to run a democracy if we're all the same. But that's not America. That's not America. This democracy is really messy. I'm telling you, right? We're picking up the baby. Whoa, Jesus. Who's in charge? But understand that. Understand that. That we can do, after 100 years of debate, we can pass the Affordable Care Act. And the response is to 52 or 54 times try to repeal it instead of fix it, instead of improve it. This week, I think it was earlier this week, the percentage of people without health insurance in Wisconsin after this first year of the Affordable Care Act is 4%.
Wow.
4% of the people in the state do not have access to health care today because of the changes we made in that law. And it's dropping in every state. Even where those governors in the red states say they're not going to extend it to poor people, they're not going to extend it to people who need it, who work and have low wages and low incomes in their family. Even with those people, denying these people health care for political purposes, we're continuing to drop dramatically the rate of the uninsured in this country. A marvelous accomplishment. Should be celebrated by everybody in this nation, that we've joined the forward-thinking nations and have the And that's what I've been able to be part of, thanks to the gift that you've given me. And I was a little disturbed when somebody said everybody who's walked a precinct for George Miller. I thought more of you would have stood up. But, my campaign staff this last election was magnificent. David and Barbara and I went out every morning. We swelled up like we were an army at those BART stations. We ran from exit to exit and entrance to entrance. I said, Jesus, this Miller's everywhere. What are you doing here this early in the morning? It's nice to meet you too. How are you? But we should. It's been a ball. It's been a ball. And at the end of the day, I just feel so privileged. And just a couple things about a couple more people. Nancy Pelosi, who thank you so much for honoring her, is absolutely the most amazing public official I've ever been in the presence of, in terms of talent and skill and knowledge and persistence and energy. All of us ask ourselves every day, how does she keep going like she goes? I get calls from her all week long, late at night, on the weekends, and she's in some other location. I keep looking, where's this call coming from? And it's because she's driven to the idea that we're going to open up this democracy, that we're going to elect Democrats, that we're going to take back the House, that we're going to extend in 2016 to the Democratic presidency once again, and we're going to put this country in a progressive calm and take care of people. And what an energy source she is, and what a magnificent person she is. And Jerry said, right, you go into the meeting, she'll call a meeting, and she has a command of that policy, whether it's the tax reform, whether it's immigration, whether it's manufacturing policy, and it's just something to be at her side and watch this woman work and to see what she's accomplished, and it's really been a great honor. I also want to say that I've had some wonderful mentors, starting obviously with my father. Who gave me a great set of values about what it meant to be in public service and what your obligations were. And watching him operate in the community when I was a young man, following him around to his campaign speeches and going to Houston. God bless him. I don't know how I ever got out of school, but he'd stop at our bus stop. I lived on, and at that time it was a pretty rural road outside of Martinez, and so he'd be on his way to Sacramento because he'd commute. And he'd say, "What are you doing in school?" Of course, if you 10 years old, 12 years old, nothing, right? You're going to miss anything if you miss school? Oh, no, nothing's going on. Math test, yes, I'm out of here. You want to go to Sacramento? Yeah. So I go to Sacramento and I sit in a meeting with Governor Brown and this person. I can do this stuff. This guy is sitting on Sean on cigars and talking to one another. Hell, I can do this. I don't have to go to school. If I can just get a few more trips to Sacramento, this is going to work out. And, but he gave me a great sense of values and service. And of course, Bert Coffey, who ran my first campaign and used to give me all these progressive magazines and journals to read. He said, read this, read this, read this. You have a debate tonight. Read this, read this. You're going to talk to somebody. Read this, read that. I'm surprised I ever campaigned. I was so busy reading. But a great sense of the ethics of a campaign and the ethics of public service. And George Moscone, who I had the honor of working with in the state senate, was a phenomenal public official. He would spend nights with me trying to get me through law school. He would quiz me on the questions at the end of the quarter and have me write exams, and he'd grade them because he graded exams one time, so he was the greatest grader of all time. But anyway, it got me through law school, so what the hell am I bitching about? It's a pretty good deal. Who's your law professor? Oh, George Moscone. He tutors me. He said, no, comes at night. and then, of course, the irascible, well, actually, there's two of them. One's John Burton and one's Phil Burton, who were just been magnificent mentors on how to prepare for battle. Yeah, John used to prepare. I mean, a lot of you don't think he prepares, but he used to prepare for battle. But Phil Burton could really prepare for battle, and he taught me a lot about how to win. I remember one time we were trying to save the great redwood forest of the North Coast, and so the question was, were the timber companies going to start yielding land? Were they going to take buyouts? Were they going to donate land for guarantees of cutting in other parts of the forest, but the magnificent areas that many of us have visited, and just one of the great wonders of the world? And these guys weren't going anywhere. They weren't budging. They like, hey, we'll see you in court. So Phil Burton, I guess he was a hell of a basketball player at one time, but by the time I got there, he wasn't very athletic. But so he grabs these executives from the timber companies, and he rolls out the maps, and these huge maps, and we're in the hallway of the Longworth building, and he's got some light out there, and he starts pointing. He says, "Okay, now tell me what you want. Tell me what you can take. What do you need?" And so they would start looking, oh, gee, we own this here, we need this, we need that, we can give you this, we can give... No, I'm not taking any of that. No, we can't do that. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. You guys got it all wrong. And he started saying, you can have this, you can have this, you can't have this, you can't have this, you can't have this, you can't have... And I went, oh, Jesus, what's going on here? And he says, now here's the deal. Can you accept this? I said, well, we don't know. We got to talk to our corporate offices in Seattle. He says, well, I got to know by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So this is like 9 o'clock at night. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm thinking, like 5 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast, you got to make a decision with them. And so I'm not saying a damn thing. And so that's it. And these guys are like, they're just sweating, and they've never been down on their hands and knees in a corridor, designing forest and their future profits and everything else, and national parks and wilderness areas. And so when they got done, they kind of thanked him and they left. And he says, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, I need a yes or no. And so we went inside, he poured himself a vodka. I said, what the hell happened out there? I said, how can they accept this? He says, oh, they're going to accept it. I says, why? He says, hell, after you show them the depths of hell, everything's acceptable. So that's what I learned to negotiate on my hands and knees on the floor. Thank you very much for this wonderful evening. From so many of you that we've been together for so very long. And again, I hope you just fully understand how much I know that none of this would have been possible without your constant support. The idea that so many of you in this room and so many before you had my back and trusted my decisions allowed me to make those decisions, allowed me to get gavelled down. I loved it when the head of the gavel, when the speaker was banging the gavel, and the head of the gavel took off and went out into the audience. People in the gallery, they were cheering, you know, and then they had to tell them, because if you're in the gallery, you can't say a word. This is the people's house, but the people can't talk, just the guys on the floor. But they were cheering like when the gavel took off across the floor. The only other time I really tested well, I test them all the time, because I just want to see if that guy's asleep in the chair or is he paying attention. They were trying to tell us how the rules of the House couldn't be broken, that there was no way for leeway, that you only get 5 minutes, and if you want more time, they don't necessarily have to give it to you, they can object. And so we have really important arguments, and hell, I got 5 minutes just saying good morning. So I would give my speech, and then I could feel that they were behind me, so I had like 30 seconds left, so I moved my speech over and I opened up this book and I started reading it, and the whole place went really quiet. And then I heard him start to bang the gavel, so I went, no. And so I kept reading, and then they were running around, and they were going, go. And you gotta object, you gotta cut off this time. And I was reading the Bible. And so that nobody would come and object. And the guy in the chair wouldn't bang the gavel. And so I'm talking, and I'm proving a point here that at one point I thought I could be here all night reading the Bible, because they won't shut me down. Aren't they going to gavel me this time? You know, they're just sitting there and finally saying, I object, I object. So I had to sit down. But anyway, that was the time. Thank you for those opportunities. Thank you so much for all the fun that I've had. Thank you so much. Mark heard this the other night. It's been a little bit alluded to. You know, I share this house with my colleagues. I've had about 7 or 8 colleagues, all of whom have gone on to do very well. As Mark pointed out, the head of the CIA, counselor to the president, Senate leadership. Everybody in the House has been in leadership. And actually, I've been running a finishing school. I take really raw material and I turn it into leadership people. It's sort of like a modeling school. You know, I teach them how to walk and talk and do press conferences and all that sort of stuff to get success. But when somebody said, well, you know, what did you think? I said I never thought about it being 40 years until we were doing an interview for CNN on our house, because there's this program on TV, Alpha House or Animal House or something. So they said, well, how long have you all been together? And so Chuck Schumer, the senator from New York, and he said,